Hello and welcome. This is how to node for startups. Part 3 of this screencast, I'll show you how to create a basic authentication system using Passport. We'll be using Facebook for the authentication. So let's create a web application using Express. To create a web application using Express, we need to do Express and we'll name the folder. We'll cd into our application, and now we have our application here. So now let's install all the dependencies first by doing sudo we don't need to do sudo here. And we'll do nodemon app.js. Nodemon is a module which runs our application and looks for any changes and restarts it. So this is our web application running on port 3000. I will change the port to 5000 and will access, and you can see that nodemon has already restarted our server, and now we are listening on port 5000. So nodemon is working good. Now we'll create a Facebook application. Go to developer.facebook.com and to apps. Then you have to create a new app. Since I have already created a demo app, I will share it with you. It has app ID, an app secret, a site URL. This is very important here because we are developing it locally. We need to provide the site URL, HTTP, localhost, and the port which we will be running on application on. So we can create a copy of the application for development purposes on a local machine and provide the URL to localhost 5000. So we need to keep the three items, which are app ID, app secret, and site URL, handy. So now we'll create config file and we'll save it as config.js. Save the Facebook app ID, secret, and URL here. So we'll do module and we'll create a namespace for development, and again we'll create a namespace for Facebook, and we'll provide the app ID here. So we can copy our app ID here. And now we'll have to provide our app secret. Can copy that from our application here. And now we'll have to provide the URL, which is and now we are set. And since we are creating a config here, I will also create a config for the database URL. I need to provide a comma here, and the database URL in our case would be MongoDB // since we have Mongo on our local host, we'll do localhost and we'll provide the name of the database, which is test. So now we are done here. We need to import our config file here. Config, and we require a config file, which is config. So we can now access our config variables here. So now let's import passport.js. We'll save that into variable passport. We'll require passport. Along with passport, we need another variable, which is Facebook strategy, and we require that by doing passport dash Facebook dot strategy. Now we'll have to set up our passport. We can do passport dot use, and we'll say that it will use new Facebook strategy. We'll have to pass some settings, which are client ID in caps, which is config dot development dot fb dot app ID. Secret config dot development dot fb dot app secret, and now we'll have to provide a callback URL. Say it is config dot development dot fb dot URL, and we'll append that URL with fbau auth. This means that after the authentication, we'll be redirected to this URL. Another parameter which Facebook strategy takes is a function. And this has 4 parameters, which is access, token, refresh, token, the profile of the user, and done. Since we need to access this data asynchronously, we'll do process dot and we'll provide it with the callback function. And here we'll check for existing users. If the logged in Facebook user is already in our database, we'll return that user, and if the user is new, we'll save that user in our database and then return the user. And for this we'll have to create our model. So we'll create a folder named models, and here we'll create a file named user, and now here we'll create a users table. So we need to do mongoose require and since we need a config, we require a config. And we'll say mongoose dot connect, and we'll provide it with config dot development dot dbu, and now we'll create our user schema. We'll create a field name FBID, which will be a string, comma, we'll create a name, and we'll create an email, for demo purposes I am creating only 3 fields, but in production you can use as many as you want to. So we'll do module dot exports dot model, now we have created our model, user model here. Now we'll go to app.js and we'll import that in here. User we have imported a model into user, and here we'll create a query if the user is in our database or not. User dot find one, and we'll query the user by its FB ID, and we'll say if it is equal to profile ID, and we'll execute the query dot execute, and we'll provide it with a callback function, and we'll pass the parameter error, and if it finds any user, it will be the old user. So now if there is the old user, we'll console log that string user, and we'll output its name old user dot name, and we'll say old user is found and logged, and we'll return that user as null. And for the else case, if there is no user of the matching profile ID, we'll create a new user and save it to our database and then return the user. So we'll say var new user dot fb id is equal to profile dot id. So now we have the user. Now we need to save it. We'll say new user dot save. We'll provide it with the callback function with if there is error, we'll throw that error. Else we'll say that new user and now we need to return that user. I will say new user. So we have our passport set up. This basically takes strategy, which is a Facebook strategy. Then we say that we provide the client ID, client secret, a callback URL, and then we pass a callback function which has 4 parameters: access token, refresh token, profile, and done, to access the Facebook data asynchronously. We say that process next tick, and we'll get a callback function in there. And if there is a user already in our database, we return that user. If the user is not in our database, we'll create a new user, save it, and then return that user. So another thing we need to set up is we'll have to serialize and deserialize the user, which is passport dot serialize user, which will take our callback function. User and done. User.id. We'll serialize the user by its ID, and we'll deserialize the user with its ID. We say user dot find one, will pass the ID. So we have serialized and deserialize user by its ID. So another thing we need to set up here in our app is we'll need cookie parser and a session. So we'll say app.use express dot cookie parser, and we'll also need the session. So we'll do express dot session, and we have to provide the secret at session, which needs to be a long string. And we'll initialize our passport by passport dot initialize. Let's say app use passport dot session. So we have everything set up here. Now we'll have to create some routes to log in or to authenticate to the Facebook. We'll create a route which would be FB auth, and we'll authenticate it with passport authenticate, and it will take two parameter, which is a Facebook comma and the scope. Since we need email here, we'll say scope is email. After the authentication, we'll have to create a route for FB auth, which we have mentioned here that the callback URL will be FB auth. So we need a route for that. We'll create a route FB auth passport dot authenticate Facebook, and it will take a failure, redirect it back to our route, and after that we need to provide a route for a route if the user is successfully logged in. So we'll provide that route which is routes logged in. Another thing we need here is a logout, which is logout, and it will take a callback function, request response, and we'll say req dot log, and we'll redirect it to the root. So now we'll have to create some real routes here. Now root file. So we need to create a route here. So we'll create experts dot logged in, which will be request response, and Google response dot render, and we'll also provide the title, which would be let it be express, and the user, which we'll get from request.user. And now we'll have to create our views, so we'll create a link here which will say after the login we'll create another view which is logged and .jade, which will copy and paste here, and we'll say user.name, and we'll provide a logout button here. Now we'll have to install Mongoose. Now we'll run our application node mount app.js, and it also says it cannot find the module passport, so we'll need to install passport and passport dash Facebook. And now we have our server running, so let's check our application. We'll refresh it. We click login with Facebook, and now this automatically logs in with our Facebook, and then it displays my name here, and then when I'll click logout, it just logs out. So at the back end you can see that it says commerce, new user commerce have created and logged in. So now let's just log out from Facebook, and now let's see what happens. So we refresh our application, we'll click login with Facebook. This takes to our Facebook login page. Here I will log in, provide my credentials. It will say existing user commerce are found and logged in. So we'll have only a single entry for my credentials in our database. So now let's click log out. Another thing I would like to show you is how to create a middleware function to restrict anybody from accessing the authenticated pages. So we'll create a function and share we'll pass request response and next, and we'll say if request dot is return with next, else will redirect the user to the root. And we can pass this middleware in our route for all the pages which we want our authentication to work. So suppose if we create a new view which is settings.js, and we'll say h1, this should be authenticated. So sorry, I'll have to rename this to Jade. And we'll create a route for that. We'll say app.get settings. We create a function. We will just render the settings page. So basically, if we pass this function as a middleware, only authenticated user should be able to access the setting page. So let's check that out. So since we have not logged in, I will try to access a settings page. Settings. We'll try to access a settings page, and it redirects us to the root of the application. Now let's log in with Facebook, and let's try to access the settings page. And so fine, and we see that we can access this authenticated page here. In this screencast, we have created a web application. We have set up the passport Facebook. Then we have stored the Facebook user data in our database, and we have created a middleware to protect user related views. So that's it for now. Have a great time.